Good morning, everyone. I'm Polly. This is Patty.
Hello.
This morning session is all about how architects use Streamtime. And in order to prove you that it works successfully, we invited someone special in this morning session. Warwick Mihaly here. Warwick, hi.
Hi, guys.
Thanks so much for joining us. Warwick, I'm just going to say Warwick is a leader in architecture, and he's also a co-founder of his own firm. And he's a Streamtime user since years and years ago, I think. So today he's here to show how he uses Streamtime and how Streamtime helps him run a successful business in a way and stay on top of his project.
Yeah, totally. Before we kick off, Warwick, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work you do, what sort of architecture you guys are involved in, how long you guys have been around for, and maybe how long you've been using Streamtime.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I can see from the attendee list that there are a few names in there that I recognise. Good to see you're interested in Streamtime. So Mihaly Slocombe's been running for 9 years, and we started using, when we were in our early days, all of our accounting and timekeeping and everything was using good old trusty Excel. And then about, I think maybe 3 years ago or so, we started thinking about growing up in that area and moved to Xero for our accounting. And I think we started using Streamtime about 2 years ago. And we primarily use it for timekeeping and reporting in collaboration still with Excel and Xero. And our work is, like a lot of architects, it's all percentage fee based on for residential houses, for houses projects. That's what we mostly do. And it means that we're talking about sort of big chunky fees and projects run over multiple years.
Cool, awesome. And what we'll aim to do today is work through what a typical job might look like for you guys, looking at how that's kind of set up, the advantages of why Streamtime is, all the advantages that Streamtime presents for you in that sense, given these are large projects with a shifting budget, looking at that time capturing as well, and then maybe talking about some of the reports that you guys are running there too, and how that kind of helps the studio at a higher level.
Awesome. Awesome. So before we drill Warwick with our questions and jump into Streamtime, a bit of a housekeeping here, guys. So feel free to introduce yourself on the side chat here, ask questions as you go. We will look after them at the end, or we'll cover them as we go as well. It depends.
Yeah, I think might be best to keep it moving, and we can come back and get those questions sorted at the end, if anyone has something specific. But yeah, why don't we get the show on the road?
Yeah.
Cool. So we've got here a job that we've set up, and this is a test job, but it's very much mimicked around how Warwick goes about setting up his jobs there at Mihaly Slocombe.
Except we don't earn that much money.
The dollar figures are slightly exaggerated. Great. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on here, Warwick, at a high level, and maybe where these figures are coming from?
Sure. So my guess is that everyone listening in will have a pretty similar breakdown to us in terms of project phases. And our current way that we use Streamtime is that each phase gets its own item within the Streamtime environment. You might call research the pre-design phase, and you may or may not have a master planning phase, but they're basically pretty consistent across architectural practices. And so what this allows us to do really, really effectively is complete a bunch of jobs and then go back and look at how long we spent on the sketch design phase across a dozen different projects, and to make sure that in the future when we're doing fee setting, we can understand exactly how many hours we actually spend on sketch design as opposed to how many hours we've budgeted for it. And then what we do is we kind of work backwards. So, I guess unlike some creative industries where you charge on what's called time and materials, where you do 10 hours worth of work and then you get paid for 10 hours worth of work, we all work on milestone-based projects. So using this project as an example, the sketch design phase, the percentage of the fee that we're going to receive from our clients gives us. And so irrespective of how many hours we spend on it, that's all we're going to get paid. So we kind of work backwards to understand what our time budgets are going to be. So, and we do actually use Excel to help us just do the maths for us rather than having to pop it into a calculator. So we start with our $163,000 fee. We work out that sketch design is going to earn us, this looks like approximately, 15% of that. We plug that number in and then we break it down further into the people who are going to work on it. Did you want to pop open the sketch design?
Open this one up.
Yeah. So we can have all of our, actually, can people see my mouse or only yours?
Just my mouse, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So all of those rates, the $150 an hour and $200 an hour, they're all pre-populated depending on the cost rates of our staff. And you can also, we can use Excel to help us understand, well, we know that Andy, who may be, the graduate working on the project, is going to do a big chunk of the work, and Polly, who's the other graduate, she's going to do most of it. But then Danielle and Nate, who are maybe, the principals of the practice or someone who's doing more supervisory work, they might be spending less time on the project. And so we can kind of work out who's going to be spending what on when. And then these hours, if you multiply it all out, gives us that 19,850 figure. And then that's what we work to. So when Polly then signs into her computer each morning and Streamtime pops up and she's logging hours on that project, she can see that she's got a 50-hour budget for that phase and how much she's used and how much is left.
Awesome. Interesting.
And the other day, Warwick, we were having a chat and you mentioned that sometimes that budget shifts, it changes throughout the course of the project, Simply that's how you guys get your figure to work with. And when that happens, you said that it's quite easy to come into Streamtime and make adjustments at each of these levels to that budget. So you can still kind of, Polly might be set for 50 hours now, but perhaps that's going to be reduced to 40 hours or increased to 60. And you can kind of still do that at any point throughout the project. Isn't that right?
That is right. So I think one of the nice things about Streamtime is it's a pretty, I guess the elegance of the way the numbers are made visible is you kind of can see quite quickly and easily where you sit. So if, the budget goes up and our fee goes up as well, then each of these phases basically have just earned what we call a windfall. And instead of having, so what Paddy's just done is reduce the number of hours. So that is a rare thing for clients' budgets to go down. But when it changes, you can kind of just, again, take the same philosophy, go back and go from the top down and see what the hourly changes are going to be. And we actually, and I guess just to sort of talk about that simply, if suddenly the budget doubles and our fee doubles, then technically speaking, everyone should have twice as many hours on any given phase to finish their work because they're working to twice the budget. And that's what we call the windfall. And the way we actually manage that is even if the phase has been completed, we still pop those new hours back into that old phase because it still then allows us to understand from a reporting perspective whether or not that phase was profitable or not.
Right.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Makes sense to us.
Yeah. I hope it makes sense to you guys. When it comes to planning, actually physically going in and planning job for your team, how do you use the schedule?
So actually the schedule and the to-do kind of interconnectivity was one of the main reasons we picked Streamtime in the first place. And so this used to be me who did all of the scheduling work, and now for the last year or so, we've had a a studio manager in the studio, and now it's her role to produce all this. But at the start of each month, we plan out the entire month, and we work out what milestones we're going to hit by the end of each month. And that is typically, we might get through an entire sketch design phase or detail design phase or something within that 4-week period. And then we know who's working on the project. And then we, again, kind of working backwards, we say, well, how many hours do we have in this phase to get that milestone? And then we plan out the time, exactly like you're doing right now. We go and allocate those hours across the entire month. And so the sort of the goal is that we want the total hours to equal 7.5 for each day, because that's how many hours people work for us. We don't ever program more than that. And we try not to program less than that either, because it's kind of nice when our staff then come in each morning, their day is kind of nice and full. But we're not trying to be so specific that it feels like the day is totally scripted down to the last minute. So, we'll pop in meetings in here if we know what they're going to be. But generally speaking, we do kind of what you're just doing there. We might just go and assign someone full time to a job for, 7.5 hours a day across that period. And then when they rocks up work, that time is already allocated in their to-do list, which is their sort of kind of like draft timesheet, basically. And we just, this was the big selling point for us, having that interconnectivity between the schedule and people's to-do page means that there's like no double entering where we schedule everyone's time and then they have to go and enter all that time in again to do their timesheets. Architects are notoriously bad at doing timesheets, so making sure it's easier. Yeah.
Glad we could make that a bit easier for you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. So it's really that connection between those two areas, the schedule there and the timesheets, that is important, because I suppose at the end of the day, that's giving you really useful information that you're going to then use to report on the business with, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think probably one of the things where time is most powerful for us, and I have to confess that we probably don't even use it to its best capacity, but we do regularly go into the jobs page and we're looking at the time sort of section of that to understand whether or not a project has burned through all of its fees yet, whether or not a project has been profitable in an individual phase, whether or not we're comparing, like we can compare sketch design phases across multiple projects, and also like even just some really, I guess, pragmatic things. So it allows us to, everyone logs hourly rates work, for instance, in its own job item, and explains, I spent an hour speaking to council about this town planning application. That's all in hourly rates. And so at the end of each month, it's a really easy way for us to then generate hourly rates invoices if we need to, because we just have this, summary. We can just filter all of our projects and just look at the hourly rates items in those projects.
Cool.
Yeah, sure.
And that's kind of aided by the fact that you guys use those very templated items, right? That you've got those structured. And I'll just go to the back end to show how we've got those set up. So in the items and expenses area under your profile and settings, these are the ones we're working with here, where we've got them set up, meaning that when we're creating a job, we're adding those 8 items consistently to each project.
Yeah. Look, one of the questions for us when we first started using Streamtime was, what is the right size for the job items? If we were to drill down really, really closely into a project and say, right, a shadow diagram for town planning is a job item, a window and door schedule during the documentation phase is a job item, we felt like that would give us really super fine grain insights, but it kind of becomes very hard to compare project to project. And so we started off by just looking at project phases. We are currently just at the beginning of thinking about whether or not we might want to break that down a little bit further into maybe client presentations or something. If we're presenting 2 or 3 times during the sketch design phase, we might break it down into those 3 bits. But I think the key is use your items in a way that makes it really easy to set up a project without you having to think at the very beginning of a project whether or not you're going to need to do some, detailed thing down the track. And then also allows the reporting to be really robust, because the phase happens across every single project, whatever that phase is, and you can then sort of see exactly what you've done project by project.
Totally.
And when it comes to planning a job, Warwick, do you use sub-items at all to have more granular plan?
We actually don't currently. I think so. We use Trello as another app to help us, sort of a to-do list, basically, because then that allows us greater control over who's doing what, and sort of a whole communication tool. But understand, I think that's sort of the key, that understanding whether or not, how to break down a project phase into smaller components and then track time against it is a really important question for us. And that's one of the things we're currently exploring. It's sort of like this ever-evolving kind of trial and error experiment, I think, to make sure that it's customized to the way we actually work rather than the way we should work.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Those sub-items might be worth exploration. You can, assign time to those as you go. But then again, when it does come back to reporting, we can't necessarily surface those reports by sub-items in Streamtime. You could do that in a CSV that you could export, but we do try and keep that item reporting at that higher level, because it gives you that more valuable information, at a glance. It's a bit less messy. You've already got those really well organized items here. So we try and organize it like that to give proper value to the data without, pulling it apart too much, giving you detail that doesn't make much sense when you're almost looking at it too closely.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is great power in the sub-items potentially, and also just depending on the way you break up a project within Streamtime, that don't really try effectively against the subtasks within a project phase, but that actually works against us in a way, because it makes it harder for us to keep on track of our hours, keep on top of our hours, because, as every architect would know, when you start the documentation phase, your deadline for that might be 3 or 4 months away, and you've got hundreds of hours between now and then to get through. How do you know if you're actually tracking on time or not? And so that's the kind of the exploration we're doing at the moment, to try and work out how we go about giving us that more granular visibility of a project to make sure we get it done on time, rather than get to the end of that 3 months and go, oh crap, we've gone over budget by 100 hours. How did that happen?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, that time reporting, it's great to hear that you're using that, as much as you do. And I think the other day you also spoke about how you use that retrospectively to look at, fee setting as well, and influence your future work that you're doing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a percentage fee base, and I should see this just to jump into one of the questions from Melissa about whether or not this would work from mostly hourly rates-based practice. I think Streamtime is fundamentally set up for hourly rates-based practice. Like, that is how it's built. And as an architect working on, essentially a percentage fee, as far as Streamtime is concerned, is like a fixed fee, where it's a milestones-based bit of work, and whether or not that fixed fee changes during the course of the project is not as relevant in this instance. It's more just that, well, it doesn't matter how many hours of work I do to get that milestone, that's what I'm going to get paid. So going just for mostly hourly rates, it's like super, super easy. But for us, with a percentage fee, we kind of make a whole bunch of global assumptions about how we do work. And so, for instance, we break up our percentage fee so that the sketch design phase gets 10% of it, master planning gets 10%, I think documentation gets 30%. But over time, that has gradually been tweaked a little bit, and that's happened because we're able to look back and go, well, do we actually spend around 10% of our time during the sketch design phase? And we try, it's not so much about front loading or back loading fees, but we know that if we're doing work on a phase of a project, we want to be paid appropriately for the number of hours that we're doing on that project. Otherwise, our cash flow is a mess. So we try proactively not to front load our fee too much, because that means when we get to the documentation phase, we just get, terrible income each month because we're spending hundreds of hours on a job and not getting paid well for it because we've already been paid sort of behind for it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally. And I imagine that report looks something like this. You're coming in here to the time list. You're probably grouping by item, I imagine, filtering for just that project so you can get a quick snapshot of the total hours on the project, where the hours were spent on each of those items across the project, and the cost and sell of each of those two.
Yeah, well, I mean, we actually use the filtering process pretty fluidly. And I think the thing that we do well is we'll keep on cutting it up. So we'll go and we'll just drill down into one project and split it up according to person, or as in our staff, or into the items, or even just to date. Or we might just look, we'll just filter it by item and then split it up by project, for instance. So we can just look at the sketch design phase across all of our projects globally. Cool. And one of the other things that we're currently working on is generating, I guess, some more saved favorite reporting processes so that it makes it easier for us to jump around that fluid process without having to constantly tweak the filters.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When it comes to forecasting potential revenue for your business, Warwick, what are the reports that you run for that, so you can plan out how much money you're forecasting to make?
Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit of a productivity hack where we use our invoices as a forecasting tool.
Yeah.
So at the start of each month, let's say we're trying to hit $30,000 worth of billable time, not billable time, but invoicing by the end of the month. Mm-hmm. And we've got 3 projects to work on in the studio. We'll then work out which milestones we need to hit that $30,000.
Yeah. And
for argument's sake, let's say we're working evenly across those 3 projects. It means we need to invoice $10,000 on each of those 3 projects. Mm-hmm. And so we'll enter that $10,000 as almost like dummy invoices into the system so that we can see what we were expecting to achieve. And then we can then compare that to what we actually achieved. So we've got the before and after invoices, and it gives us a little bit of visibility about, expectations versus actual.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea. This is the best practice when it comes to planning ahead and forecasting your potential revenue. Even though Streamtime might not be the best tool for invoicing for architects at the moment, and we're working on it. We're doing some research. Yes, but even creating those dummy invoices in advance, it's a great idea, Warwick.
I think the other day we kind of spoke about how that influences the way you operate. You said you talked about how you're working in monthly scrums essentially, and you understand the cost to the business that are going to be out in that month, and so creating these invoices in advance allow you to shape the work that will be done in the month that precedes based on where you need to get to.
Yeah, I actually remember this conversation I had a few years ago, up until which point we used to kind of plan our work out not based on the fees that we were being paid for that work, but based on how much time we thought it needed to take. And it meant that if we assumed 100 hours for a sketch design phase, irrespective of what the fee was, it meant that our targets were always totally divorced from income. And then just someone pointed out to me that what they did was, I think there's another architect who said they work out the number of hours they have on a phase or on a project based on the fee coming in. And it was like this massive light bulb went off in my head. It was like business planning 101. No one ever bothered to teach me. And I was like, oh, of course, because then irrespective of whether or not you actually hit that target, at least that's the goal. And then if that's what's in Streamtime, we can then go back and, we now know, for instance, that generally speaking, the front third of the project is generally profitable and the back, like sort of 2/3 is generally not. And we have complete visibility over that. We can now take steps to try and fix that. So we know, for instance, thanks to the tracking that we do with our budgets versus the time that we actually spend, that our documentation phase is the phase where we blow out more often than not. And it's where and of all the phases, it's where we blow out the most. And so if we're going to try and do some work to fix to improve the productivity and profitability of our studio, then our documentation phase is the one we're focusing on. We wouldn't have had that knowledge unless we actually started tracking this stuff.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And when it comes to actually invoicing, what do you do?
So we use this mongrel hodgepodge of mostly Excel and Xero. So Xero is a great tool because it sort of connects straight to our bank feed, and we need all the invoices to be in Xero so that we can reconcile our BASs and profit and loss and all that sort of stuff. But the invoices that go out to the clients themselves. And we also use Xero then to sort of manage all of our reimbursable expenses. But then our invoices are highly customized things that talk to our clients about what their budget is and what the total fee and our progress and so on. And so we still use Excel because we can customize that to within an inch of its life and get that looking exactly like we want to. I would love to not have to do that because it doesn't add much value to what we do. It's just we don't really have any other way to produce it currently.
And that kind of comes back, I suppose, to the nature of the way your fees are generated and those invoices are generated, just being such a complex kind of structure and formulas that are determining those things. And whilst it isn't necessarily what Streamtime was primarily designed to be able to cater for, those architectural invoices, it's awesome that you've kind of been able to find other ways to fit Streamtime into your workflow that are still providing value in that process without adding too much baggage or extra weight. That said, we are certainly doing research into our invoicing and how we can improve it to cater for partial invoicing and progress payments, to hopefully open some opportunities and some doors there for architects similar to you. So perhaps that is something that is coming soon that we'll be able to make work for you guys. Yeah.
Cool.
Excellent. Shall we jump to these questions?
Sounds good. I think we've covered everything that we wanted to.
Yeah.
Thanks so much again,
Cool.
Mark. There are a few questions happening here, so it's very popular, this webinar, thanks to you.
Cool.
So let's start from the beginning. The question from Sabina, what has been the best way to log hours each day?
So it's slightly different depending on who you're talking about in the studio. So Leanne, our studio manager, pre-populates. So you can use the schedule. You can use the way the schedule works within Streamtime is when you go and kind of apply a person or resource to a project, it automatically pre-populates their to-do list. And in Streamtime, the to-do list is like the draft timesheet. So you can see here that we've got Nate working on the research phase at Pyramid Road for how much have you got them on?
That's 7.5 hours there, so that's a full day.
And you can also see how it says there's 30 minutes per day available. So within this structure, you've given 8 hours per person, but a few times start instance, and we can just say, well, they're only ever in on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and so we block out their Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Streamtime kindly treats that like a weekend, basically. And then when someone comes in on the morning of Wednesday, if you hop across to the to-do list, that research phase is already populated onto their to-do list. And then when that task is done, you just drag it down below the line. And Streamtime, and this is the thing that hooked us. It gives us, you can drag the size of those tasks. So, I ended up going to a meeting for an hour and a half, and so I only ended up spending 6 hours on that thing, and I did an hour and a half on something else. You can then create those tasks separately. So because my business area's time is like really chaotic because we're jumping across lots and lots of different projects, it doesn't make as much sense to pre-populate our time as much. And so we just kind of create each of these little tasks directly from the to-do list, and then as we do them. And I actually use the mobile app almost exclusively because I'm on the tram on the way home and it takes me 5 minutes to just pop it in there. That's the best way for me to do all my timekeeping.
Awesome. Thanks.
The other thing actually, just to flag, is that we've got a special project type within Streamtime for admin tasks, and the client is ourselves. So admin, human resources, marketing, professional development, all that sort of stuff, leave is all in there. So it's all logged, even if it's non-billable work. So we can actually also see things like, well, what percentage of someone's time is spent on billable work versus non-billable work, which also helps with our fee setting and budgeting and so on.
Totally. They're cost to the business, so it's good to capture those too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So Andy is asking, what causes the budget to double? Who drives that? Is it yourself or the client?
Okay, so that was as an example. But look, I mean, we know that with our clients come to us with a scope that they want to achieve up here and a budget down here, and the thing we go through almost entirely through the entire project, but often sort of primarily at the very beginning, is to try and kind of bring them together somehow. And whether or not the project budget doubles is kind of that's not really the point. It's more that it changes. Mm-hmm. And so we sign up a fee at the beginning based on, let's say, a $500,000 renovation budget. But by the time we actually explore some options with our clients and show them what they can achieve for that budget and what their brief actually would cost to build, and then they go, actually, you know what? We suddenly have $1 million to do this project, miraculously, because we want what we want. We need some way to be able to go back into Streamtime and shift our budgets, because now we're working onto a totally different fee base.
Yeah, and Streamtime allows you to do that, to make those changes pretty easily as well.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, like in an ideal world, you'd be able to just put in the project budget and your fee, and it would kind of repopulate all out, but that's not the way Streamtime is currently set out. So we use kind of another minor hack with Excel, where we use Excel to tell us what that breakdown is, and then we just drop those numbers back into the phases like you're doing now.
Cool. There's a question there from Pippa talking about how you manage the submission phase of projects in Streamtime where there is no fee yet.
Yeah, so look, our projects don't really drop into Streamtime until they exist already. And so because our quoting that we do, Streamtime has a quoting thing as well that you can use, but it's a super simple quote that would be fine if you're sort of quoting on a couple of $1,000s worth of work, maybe for a graphic designer or a plumber or someone who's putting, a very simple sort of fee together that might only be a few days worth of work. I think that works perfectly for it. Mm-hmm. But, our client architect agreement or our fee proposal is 15 pages long, and has all these terms and conditions and has all this other stuff in it. And so we just don't even worry about popping in here. The same spreadsheet that we use to help us just manage the breakdown of our time allotments as a sort of a backup to Streamtime is the thing that helps us generate the initial quoting.
Cool.
Does that answer your question, Pippa?
Hopefully it does.
Maybe she's not here anymore.
Maybe she thought she wasn't going to get an answer to that one.
Fiona here is
Oh no, she just said, do you capture the time spent as admin? Yes, that's what I was saying before. Absolutely. So any time that's spent not on a project is still captured. And so Streamtime is set up so every project has both a job name and a client, and which allows you, for instance, if you've got repeat clients, to be able to group all of the projects for that one client together, which is not really relevant for us doing residential work. But if you're doing like multi-res where you're constantly doing a lot of work with the developer, you could see, for instance, you could drill down and say, oh, bugger, we're like constantly profitable one developer. That does. The way we use it is we go and set up Mihaly Slocombe, our studio name, as the client for all that admin time. And so we can just compare billable hours for actual clients versus non-billable hours, which is for ourselves, basically.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So the job would look something like this. You'd have those items broken down into the different potential areas of work that we're going to be captured.
We have a job name called leave. The client is Mihaly Slocombe, and we have 4 or 5 items like public holidays, annual leave, personal or carers leave, that sort of stuff. So, and then people just record their time that way.
Cool.
Good idea. So Fiona here is loving the fact that your studio manager is planning your jobs. She reckons it's a good idea. So well done. She has no question.
Sorry, just Fiona, it is worth saying we used to do it ourselves, and it was just time. And it's great to have someone who can now sort of dedicate to that. And Leanne now has her finger on the pulse about what everyone's working on and what their priorities are. And she's constantly talking to everyone in the team how to manage it. So, I mean, it's worthwhile saying that our team size is 8 people. The 2 principals, 1 studio manager, and 5, architect-y people, grads and student and architects. Sorry, the bells going in the background. I'm not sure if you could hear that.
It's all right.
And so, if we've only had that role for the last 12 months, but for the first 8 years, we did all of that resourcing ourselves.
Yeah, that's good. It took some weight from your shoulders, I guess. As well.
Yeah.
Melissa's got a question here talking about the breakdowns under each item. Research, documentation. She's asking if it would be easier to track 10 and 15-minute time slots when you're jumping from job to job, or not, if you're trying to get more granular with that time tracking.
So the smallest increment that we look at is 30 minutes. And actually, sort of part of our management process is we periodically go through, and if anyone has sort of put a stray 15 minutes in there, we like bump that up to half an hour or whatever, just to keep the numbers neat. I have a very type A personality, I think, when it comes to like wanting all my numbers perfectly lined up in a row. Streamtime allows you to get down that far, but we're not lawyers. We're not looking at 6-minute increments, and we figure half an hour is fine for us. But you could easily do it at 15-minute increments if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it makes sense. Question from Claire. I'm just gonna quote her. Do you feel like that any staff is taking a piece with their timesheet? How do you control that? Or do you feel like it happens?
Look, they know that it's important, and if they take bad, ultimately we're all in this business together, and if our timesheets don't make sense, then the business is not going to work properly. Colgate, they sell toothpaste, and they probably have a very accurate inventory of how much toothpaste they have in stock and how much they've sold and when they've sold it. Architects sell time, I know there are plenty of architects who don't track their time, and it just makes no sense to me. The only resource we have that's really that is necessary to track is our time, and everyone is part of that goal in the studio, and everyone knows that it's really important. So no, I just don't think they do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that you said. I love that. We're all in this together. So obviously it works both ways. Giving them, you're planning a job and you've got this granular project plan. You're booking out their time on their days, and they know what exactly needs to be done. So if the time doesn't get tracked properly, I know that they understand that it affects an entire business, not just themselves. So that makes total sense to me.
It's also, Erica might not like it for me saying this, but she is the worst person at doing timesheets. And my business partner is the one who creates the most grief. And for years, I would get so grumpy and mopey about the fact that she wasn't doing her timesheets well. And actually, now that Leanne, our studio manager, is on board, she's the one who gets grumpy with Erica, and she's way more effective. She now has got Erica in line, and is otherwise there is a public naming and shaming that happens. And somehow she's just managed to convince Erica to do her timesheets properly, which is great.
Hey, we've answered quite a few questions here, and I realize that we're going over time, and I don't want to hold you. So perhaps maybe we can get some of these questions together and get the answers back to those who have asked them individually. Just, keeping time in mind here.
I've got another 10, 15 if people want to hang around, or if you guys want to keep it going.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So there was a question there from Fiona. She asked about the schedule and the time tracking through the to-do screen. Do the team members have the power to work out or change their to-do list, or is it set out by you or your studio manager? Maybe you just want to touch on that one a little bit, again, explaining how that's working.
So there's a fluidity between the schedule and the to-do pages that if and so the staff are able to change their timesheets. It wouldn't make sense if they weren't, because we plan a day out in a fairly simple way. But if they are suddenly called into 3 meetings, each a half an hour long on different projects, they need to be able to track their time against those things. And I guess the classic one is what Paddy or Polly, whoever's on the mouse at the other end, is now doing is, if you don't quite get to something in a day, then you can just shift it in your to-do page to tomorrow. And then that will then actually feed back onto the schedule. And so we or Leanne can then look at tomorrow or the next week and go, oh, okay, they didn't, that now is an overloaded day because they didn't quite get to that thing. So there's an ability to give you that fine-grained control. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. We've got a question from Amon as well, asking about, do you use Streamtime to charge out your rates, or to check your charge out rates periodically, and how?
Yeah, so, on our client architect agreement, we have billable hours for if our hourly rates work, but that number is basically has no bearing on what it actually costs to do those hours. That's actually a highly profitable work for us. We then have our internal numbers. So can you just jump to the team setup?
Sure.
So you can set up each person with both a cost rate and a billable rate. And so we have that set up. So the cost rate we work on externally with Excel, where you plug in your salaries and your overheads and all that sort of stuff, and you work out what it actually costs for one of your team to have their bum on a seat working for you for 1 hour. We take into account non-billable time in that. We take into account holiday time, leave, all that sort of stuff, so that we know that across a year, the cost to run the business might be $100,000, and you divide that into the number of hours you have across the year. And so actually it costs, you have 1,000 hours. So actually it costs $100 per hour of work. And then you add your profit margin on top of that, and then that becomes a billable rate. And so when you're planning work, you're planning it on the billable rate. So essentially we know that if we actually meet budget on an item, we have paid for everyone's time, paid for the overheads, and paid for our profit. And so we use Excel to periodically manage and review that. And obviously that is something that, as a very minimum, kind of gets modified every year, particularly if you had people on the award rate, you need to update that, every year. And so their billable rates and cost rates keep on changing. And so we do go back in and modify that whenever necessary.
And there's a second half to that question from Amon, which is about different charge out rates per client or per job. Is that something you guys meddle with?
No, we don't. But that's only because we have, when we onboard a client, we kind of have this whole process of maximum transparency. That's part of our point of difference, I think. And sometimes I feel really regretful about that transparency, because I would love to add, excuse the French, arsehole factor to certain quotes. So we don't have that set up. I'm not sure. Can you even do that in Streamtime? I don't know.
Adding like a fee or like a tax or something.
Well, I mean, look, you can in a project, you could go and manually change the hourly rates on a project for sure, but you can't do it I don't think you can do it in a global way where you have all of these clients get charged this amount and all of these clients get charged that amount. Is that right?
Yeah, you'd probably, based on the way that you guys are working, which is essentially to that fixed fee, and even though you're kind of breaking it down by team members, it would be easier to facilitate that at an item hourly rate level. And the way you would kind of achieve that is by having different versions of items for different types of clients.
Yeah, Ammon has added like for not-for-profit rates. I guess the thing is that the cost for someone to work on a business per hour is the same whether or not they're working on a project, whether or not they're making lunch or working on non-billable work or not-for-profit work. So the actual cost to our business never changes, and so you probably don't even need to do that. The budgeting thing, though, if you're going to like exclude the profit component of that project, may or may not change. But I actually find it really useful to be able to always see that, irrespective of what we're getting paid on the project, because it still tells us broadly whether or not what that project is either costing us to run or earning us to run.
Totally. Yeah. I couldn't agree more with you, Warwick. Even to understand what the sell price of that should be, it really shouldn't change. Whether you're discounting the final figure is one thing, but to understand the potential value of that project is really important, I think. We often get this kind of question and we always rebut with why are you reducing your fees in these instances?
But Aaron, the Streamtime founder, actually just commented that we are thinking of adding this feature in the future, a certain rate per client. So it is coming.
Perhaps. It's being considered.
Yeah. The last question for today from Sabina, it's an interesting one as well. It's all about that level of transparency with your staff. So Sabina is curious, are you actually, does your staff have full access in Streamtime, or do you restrict their access in certain areas? How do you go about that?
So currently, the access that we give to our staff is not too different, I think, to what you've got there on the screen. So they can see the dashboard and jobs and so on. They can see their to-do lists, but they can't manage contacts or clients or even see cost rates. And part of that is about just protecting the privacy of our staff's salaries. That you can maybe go, well, if my cost rate is $80 an hour and I earn $1,000 a year, and this is $160 an hour, then maybe they're on $100,000 a year. So I now know what my co-worker's salary is. So that's the way we've got it currently. But we are actually also in a as part of this, we're doing this kind of review process of how we track time at the moment. And one of the things we're looking at is about trying to maximize transparency. And I think the philosophy there is we feel that if we can work out a way, if our staff are all okay with the idea of seeing everyone's cost and charge rates, obviously not seeing the actual salaries, but just those rates, which are kind of simplified, then everyone will have a very intimate understanding of how their projects are running from a profitability perspective. And because we have an interest in making sure that everyone on our team is sharing in the responsibility to deliver projects on budget, the more transparency they have, the better. And so we are trying to work out a way where they will be able to see how a project is tracking, not just from a perspective of time, which the jobs page already gives them, but also dollars.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really cool.
And sorry, also to another thing, Sabina, one of the beauties is that when you go and nominate, say, 100 hours for someone to work on a sketch design phase, they get instant feedback that when they track time, they say, okay, I've just logged another day's worth of hours. I only have 40 hours left. And so even if you're not giving them transparency into the dollar side of things, they can still get visibility over the time allowances that they have. Pretty cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think that's it. That's all the questions for the day. It's the longest webinar in Streamtime history.
In Streamtime history ever.
Thank you so much, Warwick, for joining us this morning. And thanks, everyone, for being so active
and engaged
this morning and engaged. That's really good. Awesome. Have a good day, everyone.
I would extend it. I mean, I know a lot of you professionally, and I'm always happy to have a chat on the phone if you want to give me a buzz.
Awesome.
Same as us. If you guys want to talk to us as well, book in a session. I think Andy provided a link as well, somewhere in the chat.
Totally.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.
Have a nice Wednesday or Tuesday. See you later.